So as I'm sure you've seen at this stage, Tyson Fury, Anthony Joshua will happen next year, and it will happen twice at that. Confirmation has come in a few forms. Eddie Hearn told Sky Sports News there's still a lot to overcome. We're looking at venues and dates, but it's fair to say they are in agreement regarding the financial terms of the fight. And then earlier on this afternoon, Tyson Fury took to Instagram.
Hello there. I'm just after getting off the phone with Daniel Kinahan. He's just informed me that the biggest fight in British boxing history has just been agreed. Get up there, my boy! Big shout out, Dan. He got this done literally over the line. 2-fight deal. Tyson Fury versus Anthony Joshua next year. One problem, I just got to smash Deontay Wilder's face right in the next fight. And then we go into the Joshua fight next year. So there we are. The Gypsy King versus AJ is on for next year, but there is a hurdle in the road called the Bronze Bomber, aka the Knockout King, and I will get onto him and knock him spark out, and then we go on to the big fight. So big thank you, Dan, for getting this deal over the line. All the best. God bless you all. See you soon. Peace out.
Now, for more, we're joined by Kieran Cunningham, Chief Sports Writer with the Irish Daily Star. How are you doing, Kieran?
Good, Joe, thanks.
3 mentions there of Daniel Kinahan in that 2-minute Tyson Fury announcement. It's quite surreal to see it in many respects as well. We've been talking about this situation in particular for maybe the guts of a month, and this is the culmination of all the work in the background. And Daniel Kinahan, according to Tyson Fury himself, is the man who has put this absolutely historically huge fight together. Yeah.
We don't need to explain who Daniel Kinahan is. Unless you've been living under a rock for years, you'll know by now. There's even been a book written on him. There's been a huge amount of coverage. The stuff is out there around him. You can make up your own mind what you make of him. And this is the culmination of what's been happening over about 4 months now, Joe. And it's clear that this has been part of a game. That a game has been played that to get Daniel Kinahan into the position where he becomes a major power broker in the world of boxing. And that started when you had that surreal rap video that was spreading conspiracy theory around the Regency shooting. When a documentary came, it was Bob Arum described him as a captain, advisor, and the guy who makes things happen in the Middle East. He went back, MTK Global, which he had founded, took him back in as an advisor. He was announced as an advisor to KHK Sports in Bahrain as well, which is heavily bankrolled by the very wealthy royal family in that country. So now he's brokered, effectively Daniel Kinahan has made this fight, according to Tyson Fury, which is interesting now that the Instagram posts have been edited since then to remove references to Daniel Kinahan, which adds to the extraordinary nature of the story. It's very, very damaging for boxing, and it makes us question where boxing is going.
Who made the edits? Tyson Fury himself?
I have no idea. But
okay, but on Fury's account, it's been edited?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay.
I believe so. Yeah. You can look into that. No, but in recent weeks, some in the US boxing media have looked into this story, because it's been striking that the coverage in Ireland has been mostly done by crime correspondents, and then there's been a bit in the sports media as well. UK have largely ignored it, and the US up to a few weeks. But now the UK, some prominent journalists in the US have looked into it. And I wonder now, is the Streisand effect that will come into play? I don't know if you know about the Streisand effect, Joe, but that was going back to a story around Barbara Streisand that was coming out back in the late 70s, I think, and she wanted to suppress it. But trying to suppress it made people more interested in the story and looking into it more. So I've seen today, people like Matt Dickinson in the Times in London, linking stories from Irish newspapers with Daniel Kinahan. I know Piers Morgan has started taking interest in it. It was interesting, Gary Lineker tweeted about that he was excited about this fight. And a lot of people got back to him and said, Google Daniel Kinahan. He later deleted the tweet saying yes. And he said, I've been reading into it. It's very interesting. So I think now, when these press conferences come around for this fight, if and when it happens, I think the media have to start asking questions, because nobody can ignore the questions anymore. They've been highlighted so much that you're not doing your job if you don't start asking.
What's been so extraordinary about the last month is that it's almost been the opposite of trying to suppress his involvement. It's almost been like a coming out party. I mean, choreographed by all the major stakeholders in the boxing world. Bob Arum came out. That was the first big one that caught my eye, and he talked about how Daniel was the captain, and he made the point that Kinahan was the go-to man in the Middle East, i.e. that Joshua's side and Fury's side had said, well, Daniel Kinahan is going to be our go-to man, come to him with all offers and we'll sit back. And that, it's an incredibly significant position. And then Sandra Vaughan came out of MTK, which up until 2017 officially Daniel Kinahan was owner of, and then sold it to Vaughan. And from that point on, they were adamant there was no official involvement. She, around the same week as Aram, came out with a video, and despite the fact that we're operating under some of the most stringent defamatory laws in the world, she talked about effectively the begrudgery of the media in the Republic, and how they almost couldn't even look on a daily basis at what was being written about Daniel Kinahan in the Irish media. Here's a clip just to jog people's memory. For instance, where she talks about almost the begrudgery and this kind of rags to riches story of Kinahan as she tried to present it.
They really need to suck it up, because where they can write about whatever it is that they write about, all this crazy, just crazy stuff. It's just absolutely insane. They want to continue to write that. They're going to have to, at some point, acknowledge the fact that, as I say, whether they like it or not, people like Bob Arum, the Prince of Bahrain, all the Frank, Eddie, all these big fights will happen because of Daniel Kinahan, right? So that's fact. The other part's fiction. So I don't know if it's the Irish mentality, but at some point, would you not be proud that someone from inner city Dublin is actually sitting at the table with that level of organisation, like the Prince of Bahrain or Bob Arum, Eddie, and making history, making fights, something that MTK is not within the organisation even got the qualifications to pull something like that off. He is in amongst all of that. Now, for Ireland, would you not be proud of that?
So that was Sandra Vaughan. That was the same week as Bob Arum. And then that same week again, Kinahan was appointed special advisor to KHK Sports, which is a sports company in Bahrain, effectively working with the Bahrain royal family. And then you mentioned there was the rap, and then there was the Regency video, which was on YouTube for a time, and effectively portrayed the Regency shooting as a government conspiracy of sorts, a Fine Gael effort to damage Sinn Féin in the upcoming general election.
It was Fine Gael, the media, and the Guards conspired to make Fine Gael win the election.
And there were like reasonably good production values around this. Money had been spent, and the hashtag Truth About Regency was going on Twitter, and the hashtag it was posted 300 times. The majority of those Twitter posts came from abroad and by accounts which had only been set up in the last 2 months. So my point on all of this, by the way, I'm just re-jogging people's memory as well as making a point to you. The Streisand suppression phenomenon I take, and yet, and it follows today with the Fury announcement, because it was very avoidable for him to mention Daniel Kinahan. Whatever was happening up until 2 months ago, if there was an element of suppression here to the extent of his involvement, that has now been dropped, and he has been pushed to the fore, and could not have been pushed to the fore in a more brazen way.
No, because I wrote about this the other day, Joe, and what I'm convinced is happening here is, if you look at the world of boxing now, Bob Arum, who has been a huge figure for over 50 years, is 88. Don King is 88. Al Heyman, been very influential in boxing over the years. He's 65, which was a traditional retirement age. And what people have to understand about Daniel Kinahan, as well as all the other things that surround him, he is obsessed with boxing, and he wants to be the king of boxing. He wants to be the equivalent of a Don King and a Bob Arum. And I think he sees a vacuum coming to be the main power broker in the world of boxing, because of the profile and the age of the people who have been running the sport for a long, long time. And brokering a deal like this pushes him right up there. Because the figures that have been mentioned around this fight, like, there's so much hype around boxing, you take so much of it with a pinch of salt. And Tyson Fury said it'll be the biggest fight in British boxing history. In monetary terms, he's right. Like, the purses will be ridiculous. Like, $500 million has been mentioned already. So from that point of view, you know, people who love the sport have to really wonder where the sport is going now. Because, you know, you look through all the governing bodies, IBF, WBC, WBA, WBO. Have they any concerns with Daniel Kinahan's involvement? Have any of the TV companies who've thrown huge money at boxing any concern about Daniel Kinahan's involvement? Here in Ireland, half of Ireland's boxing medals, over half ever, at the Olympic level, have come in boxing. At European and world level, boxing is Ireland's most successful sport. But in recent, a couple of nights ago, you had a firebombing at a gym in Ballyfermot where some MTK boxers sometimes train. In the last few years, you've had shootings outside Boxers National Stadium, at a boxing club in Bray, and at a boxing weigh-in. In two of those shootings, 2 people died. So in many people's minds now, boxing is toxic. They don't want anything to do with boxing. The most significant figure in Irish boxing, 35 years ago, Barry McGuigan became world champion. It used to be Barry McGuigan. It was Michael Carruth. It was Steve Collins. Now it's Daniel Kinahan. And that should really concern people.
A question jumping out at me over the last 2 months is, how has this happened? You know, so Bob Arum was asked about this, and he said, well, I'm just staying in my lane. You know, I'm just looking after the boxing. It's not my concern, Daniel Kinahan's business. He was asked about it. He said, it's not my concern. I'm staying in my lane. You mentioned the various. So that's maybe the money side of the business. The people who run things from a fighter's perspective, or a promotion perspective. So they're after the bottom line. Then there's the media, which undoubtedly have not made a big enough deal of this, and you've made that point. And then there are the governing bodies. Okay, so the Bob Arum grouping, I understand. The media, I understand. The governing bodies, or like if this was soccer, we'd be saying, well, what are FIFA doing? If this was a GAA story, what are GAA doing? Who controls boxing? Who is the person or the organisation or the board that should be doing some kind of fit and proper person test, for instance?
Yeah, well, a couple of weeks ago, I took part in a podcast in the Ring magazine with Kurt Imhoff. And Kurt would be an attorney in New York who's managed world champion boxers for 20 years. And he'd be very much, he knows the world of boxing well. And it's a drum he's been banging for a long time, that it basically needs one international governing body that has credibility and that's above board and that you can trust and that will judge things properly. But as things stand now, if you have an issue with Daniel Kinahan's involvement in the sport, who do you actually go to? You know, when you have so many governing bodies and so many governing bodies that operate with a very light touch, that to the outsider, it does look like just money is all that matters in boxing, that nobody else seems to care about where money comes from in any instance. You know, this isn't, you know, this go back through, there's other individuals been involved with boxing that over the years that, you know, a lot of other sports wouldn't touch. But boxing seems to give you a free pass. And that's an issue. But I think it's particularly concerning now because it's not like anybody could claim to be in the dark when so much has been put out there about Daniel Kinahan. Yeah. So many questions have been asked.
Yes, I mean, it's been talked about a lot in this country over the last couple of months. I think it would appear that his global reputation is what he's very concerned with. I mean, this is a tiny island, a couple of million people, and who knows if he ever plans to return. But on a global scale, it does seem as if Daniel Kinahan wants to be a major player in boxing on a global scale for years to come. So his reputation in that regard, I mean, it remains to be seen. It remains to be seen. That's interesting, some of the stuff, even people like Gary Lineker, for whatever cachet they have or influence they have, are maybe, they're being pointed in the direction of our reservations. But ultimately, I mean, if it was if it was a Russian person who we might have had similar reservations about who had put this fight together, how exercised would you be? Honestly, and this is an Irish story and it's a big deal, but from a global perspective, how exercised is the boxing world going to get about this? As you said, plenty of shady characters down the years. Daniel Kinahan's never had any criminal convictions, I state that again. But it looks to me as if you're right, as if there is a vacuum there, and it's going to be very interesting to see if this becomes a significant issue in the global media over the coming 2, 3, 4 months? Because, look, once this fight happens, eyeballs are on it no matter what.
Yeah, well, I think what's very interesting there, Joe, is how this goes down in the UK. There's 2 British fighters, and the UK media haven't really touched it. But as I was saying earlier, some have been tweeting about it today and thinking, "Oh, this looks interesting, and maybe we'll look into this a bit." And I think because of that, no, I don't think there's going to be huge coverage of this in Russia or Australia, or even to the extent that it should be in the US. But I have a feeling it's a story that's going to take off a little bit in the UK.
Okay.
Because I think it has to. Because when you have Eddie Hearn there,
yes,
you have the 2 boxers there. It's a big British story.
Yeah.
So from that point of view, it could damage a lot of people within boxing if a lot of stuff around this fight is highlighted.
Yeah, because you threw me a touch with your sense that the Fury announcement was edited slightly, because on the BBC tweet, certainly that tweet cuts out the start, which is, "I'm just off the phone with Daniel Kinahan." It just starts with Fury talking about the fight. And then he references Dan a few seconds in. And actually the journalists and both of us would kind of wince, because who's Dan if someone's coming to this tweet fresh? Whereas if he's been identified 10 seconds earlier, you absolutely would leave that in. So it was a very pointed edit there on the BBC tweet. Anyway, that didn't just happen.
Okay, yeah.
So, yeah.
It's strange. It's everything, it all feeds into what's happened the last few years. That it was unthinkable that Boris Johnson would be Prime Minister. It was unthinkable that Donald Trump would be US President. But they become normalised. And now Daniel Kinahan has become normalised inside one of the biggest global sports around. And, you wonder what's next. Is anyone going to shout stop? Because I think the people in Irish boxing who really care about Irish boxing have to get together and have to think of a way of fighting back and giving an option that means you don't have to work with a company linked to Daniel Kinahan, because sponsors and the wider public and the media are losing faith big time with boxing.
Kieran Cunningham of the Irish Daily Star. We'll leave it there, Kieran. Thanks so much.
No problem.
Off the Ball on News Talk.
Have a great evening with itsforwomen.ie. Don't live your life on hold. Get a quote now at itsforwomen.ie and see why we're trusted by over 130,000 women in Ireland.
Home. Suale. We're at home a lot these days, but we can still explore with the TG Ceathair player. Explore the home of Irish content. Home to award-winning documentaries. Home to critically acclaimed series. Home to... Let's make